Hello film fans and welcome to this episode of the Sherlockian. So I reviewed Frozen Planet 2 episode by episode and I've reviewed Life in the Freezer. So I thought it was about time I reviewed Frozen Planet 1. But I was slightly unsure as to what to say about it. You see, I remember Frozen Planet when it came out, but I don't remember having any particular strong views about it. The only thing I could remember was this was the BBC wildlife documentary that got in trouble because it showed footage of polar bears being born, and it turned out that they'd been filmed inside a Dutch zoo. Now, I have to admit, I have kind of mixed feelings about this. For one thing, the scene itself is absolutely gorgeous, and you wouldn't know it wasn't filmed in the wild at all. I'll come back to that in a bit. And it looks lovely, and it's got these beautiful, intimate scenes of the female polar bear nuzzling her young and then suckling them. And the baby polar bears, while slightly ugly, are very kind of cute in the way they interact with each other and their mother. So it's a wonderful kind of scene from a biological perspective. You see something that simply wouldn't be possible to see in the wild, not without being eaten by an enraged mother polar bear anyway. However, I have to be said that I'm not a massive fan of sticking things that were filmed in zoos in the middle of wildlife documentaries. Or at least if you do that, I'd quite like to be told. So, for example, it's long been rumoured, and I think probably quite rightly, that a lot of the scenes in the original Life on Earth series, which arguably is probably one of the most major famous documentaries ever made, it really kick-started David Attenborough's career again in the sort of early 90s. It's long been argued that the scenes of underwater life in that show were filmed in aquariums, and I think it's probably quite likely. I don't know if it's ever been confirmed or not by the BBC, but it is quite probable. That being said, I don't particularly mind that, because at that point technology really wasn't quite up to the task of filming, and it also, Life on Earth kind of sits within that kind of early period of documentary making when that was still kind of permissible. But if you do that, I'd like to be told. And while the BBC did put footage of how they filmed the polar bear scene on their website, and you can still look it up if there's a link on Wikipedia, which takes you directly to the page and you can see how they filmed it. Having said that, I do have some sympathy with the Daily Telegraph journalists that broached this story. I've been rude quite a lot about the Telegraph in the past on this show, but I think they were quite right. The BBC in the actual show really didn't specify that they'd filmed it indoors. You really can't tell at all, either from the shot or, crucially, from David Attenborough's narration, which, while it never specifically says it's filmed in the wild, you are led to believe that that's what's going on. So while I actually quite like the footage, I do think it's a little bit sneaky. But as I said, that was basically the only thing I remembered about it. But I wouldn't want you to think that I kind of dismissed this show as, you know, just another wildlife documentary or only famous because it showed footage in zoos, because it's actually quite good. For one thing, I really like the way they laid it out. It's very seasonal. It really reminds me of the famous Yellowstone documentary, which I think was also made by the BBC, which looks at Yellowstone season by season. This does a very similar thing, but with obviously the Arctic and the Antarctic. Also, it has one of the best orca hunts that I've ever seen. I've been on record before as saying that my two favourite orca hunts, because obviously there's quite a lot of them in a lot of different documentaries, are the one from Blue Planet and the one from The Hunt. The Blue Planet one is more atmospheric and more essentially scary, but the one in The Hunt is more beautiful. It looks gorgeous with that kind of clear azure blue water and all the footage that they shot underneath. Looks absolutely amazing. But this one probably ranks, it's not as cinematic as the Hunt one, and it's not quite as emotionally intense as the Blue Planet one, but it's getting on for that. It looks absolutely amazing, and it didn't surprise me at all to find that Doug Allen, who filmed the Blue Planet one, was also a cameraman for this one. Though it has to be said that I think the work of his co-cameraman, Doug Anderson, is even better in this particular sequence. Doug Allen did a lot of the close-up stuff, but it was Doug Anderson who actually went out in an inflatable boat and then filmed the underwater shots, which are absolutely incredible. it really interested me to seeing this footage again after having just watched Frozen Planet 2 to realise that actually a lot of the stuff which I raved about when I was reviewing that show actually was shown in Frozen Planet 1. It was just more cinematic in Frozen Planet 2. But I actually think I preferred the Frozen Planet 1 one, if that makes sense. Because the footage below the water is absolutely brilliant. For one thing, it really gives you a sense of how big the orcas are compared to the seal. They're massive, but also how tentative they are when they're hunting. They really seem, worried about getting injured. They use lots of different techniques like smashing with their tails to try and disorientate the seal, and blowing bubbles to basically create a kind of underwater smoke screen, for want of a better word. And the way they grab it from behind and basically drag it under the water to drown it is also really interesting. And it really gives me the creeps, particularly the bit at the end when they show that brilliant shot of the seal gradually being dragged off the ice. And you get the sense for a lot of the hunt that the orcas could kill the seal quite easily if they wanted to, but they're just enjoying playing with it. It kind of feels quite malicious, and I use that word advisedly because, of course, it's a mistake to anthropomorphisize animals too clearly. Obviously, the only animals you can really sort of call, for example, for want of a better word, cruel or unpleasant are humans. Other animals generally work through instinct. But with orcas, it almost blurs that line, doesn't it? There's a few things that really make me think, ooh, you're enjoying that a little bit too much, aren't you? But it's absolutely fantastic, and hats off to the camera team. It also shows wonderful footage of them filming it when the orcas then began to sort of circle the boat. And personally, the camera team didn't seem too bothered by it. Doug Anderson, banging on about how wonderful it is to be really close to these creatures and how he's never going to get another opportunity. And I'm thinking, they're actually beginning to start to look like they're hunting you. They actually come towards the boat in unison and actually begin to start to create a wave. And I was thinking, you're a bit calm. Or, mind you, he was talking about it after the event, so maybe at the time he was a bit more worried. But yeah, gave me the creeps watching it. I mean, I know orcas aren't generally supposed to attack people, not in the wild anyway, but still, they seem to be a little bit blasé about sort of hanging around these really powerful predators, which are quite capable of killing people if they want to. Other than that, the one thing that really stood out for me when I rewatched the series to do this video was quite a strange one, really. The scene with the giant petrels scavenging in it. Now, I don't think this has ever been said, but I actually quite like giant petrels. They're basically like Antarctica's equivalent of vultures. Obviously, you don't get vultures in Antarctica, so what you get instead is kind of these yeah, I suppose you'd call them scavenging albatrosses. I mean, I know petrels aren't quite the same as albatrosses, but they're fairly similar. And indeed, giant petrels look quite a lot like if somebody had crossed a vulture with an albatross. They've got the same kind of layout as an albatross, with the kind of I don't know what it's called, but that kind of bump on the top of their beak, which apparently seabirds use for kind of filtering drinking water from seawater. Also, I've read, it might not be true, but I'll double check, and if it's not, this will pop up on the screen. But the scene I really liked is when they're scavenging on this seal carcass, and they got this beautiful, like, slow motion shots of them all fighting each other and bickering, and it looks really good. Also, they make this absolutely amazing noise, which kind of sounds like a combination between a whale and a donkey. But it sounds great. I really enjoyed it. And the way they filmed it, with all this like wonderful slow-mo, it's quite incongruous because the petrels themselves are actually quite ugly, and they're obviously behaving badly, for want of a better word. They're fighting with each other, sticking their head in the seal carcass. But it looks absolutely gorgeous, and there's these lovely scenes as well when after they've finished feeding, they start bathing in the surf, and yeah, it looks lovely. The other bit about that scene, which is really cool as well, is it shows you pintail ducks scavenging on this carcass as well. Now, of course, it makes perfect biological sense. I mean, if you're a duck in Antarctica, you're not going to pass up on free food. But nevertheless, I found it quite incongruous. I thought, oh yeah, you don't really think of ducks, do you? Like scavenging on leftovers. You don't really think of ducks eating meat. So it looks quite interesting. Talking about scavenging, the other bit I quite enjoyed was the bit with the wolverine and the raven. Now, I like both those animals. I think ravens are one of my favourite birds, and wolverines are one of my favourite animals. And so it's this really cool scene where you see the wolverine and the raven working together. Essentially, the raven alerts the wolverine to a presence of a kill by obviously calling, frequently. And then when the wolverine arrives, it obviously breaks the kill open, which is now frozen because obviously it's freezing cold. And after having ripped the carcass open, that then allows the raven to feed. So essentially, the raven is using the wolverine a bit like a massive can opener, for want of a better word. But I just really enjoyed it. And it's not a particularly long sequence, but I quite like the way it's shot. And I really like the way the wolverine, when it's tearing into the carcass, you can actually hear it growling to itself. I always think wolverines look a bit like, they always look a bit, I don't know, kind of malicious badgers, don't they? They look a bit like that they're always up for a fight. And I really like the fact that even when there's only one wolverine, it's still kind of talking to itself and growling away as if it's going like, yeah, I'm gonna get you. Anyway, I quite enjoyed that scene. So yeah, that was my quite quick review of Frozen Planet. Overall, I enjoyed it more than I expected it to. I think out of the three, I enjoyed it less than Frozen Planet 2 and Life in the Freezer. But that's not to say it's bad. It's just, I don't know really. It's just kind of, it's a bit like vanilla. I like vanilla ice cream, but there are some types of ice cream I like better. It kind of feels like a work in progress. I can see now a lot more than I could back when they introduced Frozen Planet 2, while they decided to do a sequel to it, because unlike things, say, like, I don't know, Blue Planet, or even things like Planet Earth, which, are generally well regarded. I know I was slightly dismissive of Planet Earth in my review of it, but other people seem to enjoy it a lot. And so when they introduced the idea of doing sequels to them, I did sort of think, do you really need to do another sequel to it? But I can sort of see with Frozen Planet why they'd think, yes, it's good, but you can build on that. You can look at other snowy environments. You can use different filming techniques to film the same stuff. So I understand a lot more now why they decided that they thought a sequel would be a good idea. Anyway, that was the Sherlockian. Thanks very much for watching, film fans. I really enjoyed reviewing Frozen Planet and going back to it. If you'd like to subscribe to the channel, I'd be very grateful. And if you want to follow me on Twitter, my link is in the description below. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!